Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about counseling theory and group work and how the two can be integrated so that we can have more intentionality and rationale behind our interventions. The book that I've been drawing from, the Jacobs et al. Textbook on I'm looking over at it, group counseling, and it's very practical and hands-on of giving you kind of the how-to guide, and it goes over several different theories. So for those of you who are, reading, obviously taking this class from me, reading that, but others who are watching this, that book is where there's some good examples of counseling theories applied to group work. But I'm going to take a different approach. I'm not going to just review exactly that book. I'm going to just talk about a few just general thoughts about applying theory to group work that I think intersects well with the textbook, but also is a little bit different. So I think that when it comes to theory, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about applying theory to group work or just counseling work in general. But in my mind, should answer three main questions. So the first one is what is happening? And particularly for groups, what is happening in the group? So theory should allow you to conceptualize from the framework and with the language of that theory what's happening. And then you start to get an idea of why might the group be responding in the way they are. So the what's happening, and then why is it happening that way for this particular group? And then the last one that's really important is how can I help as the group leader? What is my role in helping based on that conceptual framework that I understand of what's happening? What's my role in helping the group move forward? So theory needs to be able to answer those three questions. So I'm going to go through just a quick example. So I've worked with a group before, and they were pretty withdrawn emotionally. It seemed like they were holding back, as if they wanted to keep the group superficial and kind of light. They didn't want to jump in. I think there was a lot of fear going on. There was, I know it was actually because later on, like I pushed them enough to where they're open to processing a bit more what the reality was. But initially there's this withdrawn emotional experience, holding back and seeming to want to keep things superficial to stay safe. So what I'm going to try to do here is just kind of from an existential perspective as well as from a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective answer those three questions for this group. So number one, obviously the nuances are important. I'm not going to go into tons of detail just for confidentiality's sake, but just enough to be able to give some context. So someone entering this group experience of this withdrawn, emotionally held back, superficial, initially seemingly wanting to keep things superficial group, existential thought of what is happening might be the existential leader might be thinking, okay, this group might be wrestling with some of the core existential givens that Irvin Yalom talked about. So they might be ultimately struggling with freedom and responsibility. That's a key tenet. That's one of the four existential givens. So sometimes people don't want the responsibility of being free. They want the group leader or the counselor to take over. They want to be directed. So an existential group leader would really push against that and say, "Hey, yes, I'm a partner here. And we'll talk about the I-thou relationship in a second. That the existential group leader would want to have an I-thou relationship. But ultimately, if the group is just saying, hey, we're going to keep things light, we're not going to take any risks, we're going to be emotionally withdrawn, then they might not be wanting to take that responsibility to be honest and authentic in that freedom to make the group what they need it to be, especially if it's a process oriented group. So that might be one thought from the existential counselor initially of what might be happening. There also might be this idea, another existential given is this idea of isolation, that the group might be isolating from one another. They don't really know how to genuinely connect. So there's these fears are holding them back from this form of connection. So this existential isolation is a bigger concept, but even in the social microcosm of the group, they might be experiencing this. Oh, as individuals, we're isolated and we're struggling to know how to overcome, at least in part, that isolated experience. So, anyways, those are just a few reflections that an existential counselor might be thinking as they're looking at what's happening with this withdrawn group. And then I've kind of entered the why as well when I was answering that question. So the why might the group be responding in this withdrawn way? Uh, so yeah, maybe it's the group feels it's safer to be isolated than to be emotionally connected. So they're once again that related to that isolation. So when I'm isolated, I'm safe might be the message that they're feeling. Uh, and like I talked about as well, I believe it was Rollo May. I might be misquoting that, but there's this idea of the client, and in this case, the group is the client, is shucking responsibility, saying, "Hey, I'm trying to relinquish responsibility and freedom for in this group experience." So once again, the group counselor might be thinking, why might the group be responding this way? Because they don't want this responsibility of taking the direction of the group upon themselves, or they're wanting the leader to control the group, so they're just waiting passively for the group leader to take over and to create meaning for them rather than them generating meaning. That leads to that last one. That's the group from the existential counselor might be thinking the group's been socialized to avoid meaning-centered work. Why? Not necessarily sure. I think in some ways, like society is, you know, they might be in like a trance-like state where they're just kind of living and waiting for authority to guide and direct them. So once again, a few reflections on why might the group be responding this way. Then how might the counselor, the existential group counseling leader, intervene to help? So the I thou relationship is really important for existential counselors. Anyone who's seen Irvin Yalom do his work in action can really kind of see that he really leans into just the human to human contact, the honesty of just, I'm not above you, but I'm going to be really honest with you. Like, we're in a shared human relationship, a shared human experience here as just once again as humans. So that can lead to a lot of immediacy, just addressing the here and now moment, what's happening right now between us. How are you feeling about me as the leader? How are you feeling about each other as group members? So yeah, the existential leader would likely address the potential freedom and responsibility relinquishment. They might, like that might happen through the immediacy of just saying, it seems like you're trying to say, hey, I don't want to take risks. I don't want to take the responsibility to direct this group. And so the group is staying back passively, kind of waiting for me to take the lead, and I'm not going to, so that might be an immediacy intervention that connects with existential thought. Uh, Ultimately, what I did with the group was kind of that. It's kind of addressing, I didn't use the language of freedom and responsibility, or like meaning centeredness, but I saw it as the group was missing an opportunity. There's a real opportunity to be honest with each other that they were choosing to sidestep. And I basically just said that to the group, that I feel like there's a whole lot more potential here to this group to make this meaningful. And everyone's seeming to want to withdraw, not be engaged with each other. And I wasn't trying to say it in a way to like judge them, but I was just trying to say honestly, that's how I'm seeing the group. That the group is choosing to use their freedom to withdraw and to make this less meaningful or meaningless. Uh, and sometimes you might say statements like, if you believe this is true, you might say something like, I believe that some of you want this to be more meaningful. If you notice nonverbals, that some are kind of leaning in when things get more honest with the immediacy. So you might say that, I see that some are ready to move towards more honesty here, but something still is holding you back. I'm not sure what that is. So then once again, kind of entering the immediacy of the here and now of the dynamic might start to open up some of those existential uh, interventions and conceptualizations to come to the surface. So anyways, just a few reflections on existential thought. But now let's jump to CBT. So there might be some overlap of actually the skills you use. Like both approaches are going to be using just the core counseling skills of reflective listening, of the immediacy, of kind of drawing out, etc. But their conceptualization of what's happening and ultimately their choices and their rationale are going to be different. So the CBT group leader, they might see what is happening in the group as, okay, the activating event might be that the group started. So there's something about being in a group dynamic that is an activating event for the group members. And that leads to this emotional nervousness potentially, or this behavioral withdrawal of not wanting to engage. So that's that in the ABC model, there's the activating event, there's the behavioral or emotional consequence, but then the key task is, or the why is the group responding this way? The answer would be because of their beliefs. We need to work on their beliefs because they might have some irrational beliefs that are leading them to think that I must withdraw. So some of the beliefs might or could be that groups are unsafe. So it's best to not show honest feelings. It's best to withdraw. Or maybe the belief is I'll be hurt if I share honestly. Maybe they've been once again socialized, or they've learned from previous experiences in, whether it's family of origin or other or peer groups, whatever, that if I'm honest, if I'm vulnerable, I get hurt, I get burned. So they're going to want to withdraw here in this group. Uh, so yeah, so that's kind of the key task of the CBT counselor, or the key conceptualization is like that's likely what's happening from this framework is the why behind the withdrawal is these irrational beliefs that maybe are based in a rational experience from the past. Like it makes sense if you've been burned that you're going to be afraid, but maybe those beliefs are no longer serving them in this context. Maybe this could be a safe place, and the irrational belief is that all relationships are unsafe. All relationships are gonna, like, I'm always going to be hurt if I share honestly. Uh, all groups are unsafe, so it's always best to not show feelings. So this all or nothing thinking could be part of that irrational belief, to where we could work on some cognitive flexibility, and that leads to how can the counselor respond? Like, how can the counselor intervene to help? So maybe it's they teach briefly the ABC principles, and then they really lean into maybe the B and the C. So like I would if I was working from the CBT model, I'd probably try to inquire into and reflect the feelings first, the emotional consequence of trying to empathize with where they're currently at, and then shift to the beliefs. Okay, so so you have these feelings that are valid, that you're feeling them strongly in the room, that are holding you back. What are the beliefs that are informing those feelings? And then you kind of go to this cognitive approach of asking about what are those beliefs, and kind of getting a maybe from the Jacobs et al. Textbook, they kind of talk about how the group can help generate a list of tentative ideas or hypotheses about what's going on. So so once again, you might throw out some, but maybe they'll start saying like, I don't know. I don't know. We'll find out what the specific beliefs are. And maybe particular individuals need to have some time spent on them, 5 to 10 minutes, to process their beliefs so they can be deconstructed, and maybe the all or nothing thinking can be processed to help them like basically restructure their belief system in a more rational way. And then the observers will be able to learn from that too, and start to share their experiences. Oh yeah, I was afraid because when I was little, I was, screamed at for being honest. So I learned that I can't be honest anywhere. Uh, but maybe I can be honest, like here. So they might be able to learn from each other's, and then start to share those beliefs and have those reconstructed as a group. So anyways, there's tons of different theories out there. There's tons of different approaches, but I think if you can think of those three questions, the first two really help you conceptualize what's happening in the group and why is it happening. And then the next one is more intervention based. How can I help? How can I intervene to from that conceptual framework? Uh, so anyways, I hope that gave a few ideas, a few thoughts of how theory can help inform group work. So reach out if you have any questions, and yeah, happy to help.